Oh yeah, here we go, practice acquisition. There are pitfalls throughout the entire process. If you want to buy a practice, this is how, folks.
Acquisition Unscripted, the truth when buying and selling a dental practice. And now your host, Michael Dencio.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Acquisition Uncensored. I'm super excited about this episode. We've got Robert Montgomery, a legend in the industry, top attorney in the country, helping doctors just like you put together legal documents from associate contracts all the way to purchasing your own practice, buying your own building. Awesome resource for you, so stay tuned. We talked about a lot of awesome things like, the pros and cons of having a super detailed contract versus open-ended contract. We talked about how you could get too aggressive, but maybe too lenient as well throughout the process, and where that happy balance is throughout the whole journey of an acquisition, purchase and sale agreement. He just gave us so many good tidbits. We talked about lawsuits, post-close and what that looks like. My favorite probably quote is, as he helps you or your dental attorneys help you, controlling the process saves you money. And that's really important because oftentimes my clients, dentists, think, I don't want to get my attorney involved because it's expensive. And the bottom line is if your attorney can control the process, you will actually save money. And so I think that was a huge tip. I'm super excited about this episode. Let's get it started. And by the way, as always, remember, follow us, review us on iTunes. We're on YouTube. We're on pretty much every channel. You can also check out Startup Uncensored, which is a great podcast all about startups. Let's get this party started. All right. Welcome to another episode of Dental Acquisition Uncensored. I'm Mike Dencio, your host, and today I am super excited about today's interviewer. We are going to break down a purchase and sale agreement, and hopefully uncensored style. I'm going to try to get an attorney to go outside of his box and maybe give you some tips and tricks that could really help you throughout this process. But as you know, we're working through the process of an acquisition from start to finish, and legal is so important. We're interviewing a couple attorneys on the show, and this particular attorney I have a ton of respect for, and you all know him. He's got a successful podcast himself, Mr. Robert Montgomery himself. He is the owner and founder and runs a very successful firm, has 7 attorneys under his banner. You can reach him at yourdentalattorney.com. And the reason I got a hold of Rob, because he and I are podcasters, and you all have probably heard his podcast, Dental Amigos. So I could keep going on and about this guy, but why don't I just introduce him? Robert, nice to meet you. Thanks for being on the show.
Michael, thank you. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. What's it like to be the interviewer instead of the interviewee instead of the interviewer? Is it different?
It's not all that different because our podcast, like yours, Michael, is very unscripted. So I think if we had one of those podcasts that required me to do a long outline of questions and preparation, I might say otherwise. But we kind of roll like you, and probably, I'm not even going to admit how little time we spend preparing. I do a rough outline of the things we want to cover. I show it to my podcasting partner, Paul Goodman, and he looks at it for about 15 seconds. And then we tell my paralegal, hit play, and away we go. So
isn't that nuts? How little? I mean, we're saying it's super easy, but this is actually hard stuff. I mean, you're always on. Can't say something too bad, even though this is acquisition uncensored, but
right.
It's difficult, but it's fun. And why do you guys do it? I know why I do it. Let's give the audience why you guys do it.
Yeah, it's so like Paul and I have been friends for I think like 12 plus years. As I said, the COVID like time warp is kind of interfere with my sort of timeline of a lot of things, but I think it's like 12-ish years. And over time, Paul was always a very good about running continuing education courses in person, back in the old days, right? And was very involved with a residency program at Albert Einstein Hospital in Philadelphia. So he's always, even when he was a younger dentist, he was really focused on that. So we found ourselves a lot of times sitting in the back of a cab. That's how far back we're talking about, not an Uber, Michael.
Yeah, not an Uber or Lyft. Yeah, that's
right. Going someplace, talking about deals or issues or things that came up in the course of a dental practice. Me from a lawyer's perspective, Paul from a practicing dentist, and said, like it would be really cool if we were able to record this conversation so that people could sort of eavesdrop and hear about like what two friends, one a lawyer, one a dentist, who are in the back of a cab, sitting at a bar having a beer, or talking about. And that would just be fun content. And so that's when we started doing it.
And 13 years later, it's crazy. I'm on year 3, and I love it. I'm addicted. I think it's about giving back to the industry. For me, it's also putting out great information, and I know that can be a blessing and a curse. We were talking before I hit record today, and that could get you into some trouble, taking everything we say black and white. Everybody's scenario is different, and so you got to be careful about free information. But for the most part, the information that you get is spot on with quality professionals in the industry. So big picture, let
me stop you there for a second, Mike, if I could. Yeah. So it's probably a good time for me to throw in the lawyer disclaimer,
yes.
Right?
Do it.
So while I'm a lawyer, we're going to be talking about some legal issues here today. What we talk about shouldn't be deemed to be legal advice to any of you. We're talking about things in generalities for educational purposes. Like you said, every deal, every situation is different. You should consult with a lawyer before you make any major decision about your specific project or deal. And as I said, we've had times over the years where people will say, "Hey, Rob, you said say to me," and I look at my notes like, "When did we talk about this?" "Oh, not podcast." No. But I think too, what we did talk about also, Michael, is that I think it's a good thing for people like us that our listeners get to hear us talk, hear what our mindset is, what our philosophy is in a business legal world, that they could say, "Yeah, I'm on the same page. I like that." And there's going to be people that listen to Michael Dencio and Rob Montgomery like, I don't want any parts of those guys, and that's cool. There are other people out there that do what we do. You should work with people that you are like-minded with and that you like to work with. And so, and while this obviously is for everybody's enjoyment, I find that it's really a great thing for people to be in sync with us and kind of know how we go about our business before they reach out to us.
I love that. I couldn't agree with you more. And yes, it is uncensored. So I'm glad you threw out that disclaimer, sir, because maybe we could get you into some uncomfortable spots today, and we can always fall back on that disclaimers. But yeah, so I have to say, 7 attorneys you cover nationwide, with the exception of California. Didn't know that. It's good to know. But licensed in 18 states, like that, that's crazy, crazy awesome. So, folks, we have a legend in the industry today. So let's buckle up and let's get into it. I always say let's get right into it, because we're probably getting people in their car rides, and we only have a short minute or two to catch people's attention. So with all that being said, let's get into the purchase and sale agreement. Purchase and sale agreement is like the marriage certificate. I always say when you're going through the process and you're looking at practices, you're dating. Actually, no, you're actually just having coffee. Call it the pre-dating. You're just looking at practices, call it what it is. And then I'll submit an offer. We'll hopefully get that practice, and then we go through that due diligence, and that's really when you're dating, during that due diligence phase. And then you get married at the end of this, and that's the most important piece to the whole process. It's your marriage certificate, and it's the rules of what we've laid out up to that point. Robert here protects you. So Robert, give us like kind of like the idea and the philosophy around like how to approach just big picture a purchase and sale. I'm lofting one up. You could take it anywhere you want, but how important is that purchase and sale document?
Yeah, it's one of those things that if it's not done properly, it could be a problem. I will tell you as a lawyer, it shouldn't be too terribly challenging. If it is, then that might be a sign of a bigger problem. I mean, I think it's important for a practice buyer to have their lawyer prepare the initial draft of the agreement. It's something that we feel strongly about. I think there are a lot of dentists that feel, and it's counterintuitive to some extent. I realize that it might be cheaper or better for them to allow the seller to prepare the initial draft of the agreement, but it's the buyer that needs the protection in this deal, and it's the buyer's lawyers that are going to need to do what needs to be done after the agreement is signed to get you to the closing. And for us, it's always easier and faster, and turns out better for us to use our documents to protect our buyer clients than to have to work off of somebody else's documents. And I think one of the best examples, to show you kind of why that is, I mean, think about this as a seller and a seller's lawyer. How would you draft the covenant not to compete in an asset purchase agreement if you represent the seller? I mean, anything that you do that really has teeth and really gives the buyer protection is just bad for your seller client. So, I mean, I think that really exemplifies why it's better to have your buyer, as a buyer, your lawyer, do the draft. And most lawyers are charging on the basis of an hourly rate, and so time is money. And if it's more efficient for your lawyer to do what needs to be done to protect you, then that's what should be happening in these deals.
I like that comment, Rob, because I think that I get a lot of this with my buyers, my clients, is like, well, I don't really want to get my attorney involved because the clock starts ticking, and they get like nervous about using their attorney. So they made a good decision in getting an attorney involved, and then they start getting protective of that attorney's time. But I think what you just said nailed it. I'll reiterate it in a different way. By having your attorney draft the purchase and sale, they're going to be very comfortable working with their document. So wouldn't it make sense that would save you time through the process? Is that ultimately what you're saying?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, and then, kind of that manifests itself in other ways too, as you say it that way, because it's really the whole process works better if we're allowed to manage it and deal with, there's one channel of communication where our clients try to do things, they're well-intentioned to stave off issues or to have conversations with the seller. They think that they're solving problems. They don't realize a lot of times they're creating problems. And, if we're left to our own devices, we know how to run a deal. We know what needs to be done and when, and we can just do it. When we have to try to put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak, that's where things start to get bumpier. That's where things start to get more costly and more problematic. So for us, if somebody says, hey, you tell me what to do, you take ownership of this, then that's in a better position than us. Now, that's not to say that we don't want our clients to have their head in the game. We want them to be focused. We want them to be reading what we send. We want them to ask questions. We want them to be informed. We want to counsel them. It doesn't mean that they just sort of peace out and say, hey, they're doing it and I'm not worried about anything. Like, we still want them to participate, but it is more efficient, and and it'll turn out better too. I mean, I always analogize it when I talk to new clients of this issue. It's just like the dental profession. Do it yourself right the first time, and it will go faster, it will be smoother, and it will turn out better. Try to fix somebody else's bad work, takes longer, it's more aggravation, and takes more time and doesn't turn out as well. So like, where's the upside to that? It's an important thing. And I will say also, it goes beyond just the document itself. For us, our document is also our roadmap to get a deal done, and it may not be obvious to the people that are reading the agreement for the first time, but we have processes baked into that document as to what we need to do, what we need to deliver, what we need to get, that makes it a lot more efficient for us on our end than if we're trying to basically work with somebody else's set of rules, so to speak.
I want to transition. You said something that was leading me directly to my next question, and it is, I oftentimes find myself, as the buyer's rep, I'll find myself in an A role and then a B role. And when it gets to the legal process, I'm in a B role at that point. You're in the A role, or whatever, quarterback, running back, right? I'll go to the running back position. You're the quarterback when it hits legal. And I don't like to helicopter anybody in that process as a consultant, because naturally that's your game. But I do get clients, two different clients. I get the clients that read every sentence and critique your work to the T and almost drive their bill up and create all kinds of chaos to the seller and the seller's attorney. And you're trying to maintain those expectations also, but also you're trying to please your client. And then I get the other client that is literally not even involved at all. And it's like, dude, you got to read this stuff. And they'll send it to me and I'll be like, okay, I know what this says. I can read this, but you need to read, like, only you are going to care about this deal more than everybody else. You care about it more than me. You care about it more than Rob. It's your life, And so those are the two profiles.
Yep.
Walk me through the dangers of both of those profiles.
Well, I'm going to say, though, happily, Michael, there is a third profile, which is the happy medium. Right?
Yeah, of course.
So thankfully, they're not all at those extremes, but we deal with those extremes as well. I think to the sort of, we'll call them the micromanager. Again, we like people to have their head in the game, but realize as a legal consumer that sending a one-sentence email that is an open-ended question that calls for a long narrative is not necessarily in your best interest. There and there's a lot of things obviously that get done via email today. I'm not gonna sound like a Luddite and say that technology is bad. I mean, there's definitely good uses for technology, and there's a great time to reach out to your team via email. And there's certain questions that are appropriate for email, but to ask an open-ended question as to why is it important for the agreement to have a covenant not to compete? I mean, somebody could write an entire book about that, Michael, and so you don't want to ask questions that invite an hour-long written response. I think a lot of times it's better to say, hey, I have a lot of questions about this. I want to go through a number of things. Can we schedule a call? And let's talk about that. And then, you can rattle off 10 things maybe in 20 minutes that, could take hours literally of the back and forth that, it's just not efficient for anybody. And, we don't like necessarily doing that either. I think a lot of people have this misconception that we get really psyched when it takes more time to do something. We don't, even though we are paid on an hourly basis, we, like dentists, would prefer things go smoothly and efficiently, so brain damage in any way is not our preferred course. So, I think, being mindful that you don't want to get into this sort of back and forth email exchange where there's this open-ended 8, 10, 12 messages going back and forth to your lawyer. It's just not efficient for anybody. Save them up, try to get, a conversation where you can talk about those things, try to be a little more economical with how you're pinging your team.
That's perfect. What about the dangers of folks that have no hands-on? We just talked about the person that's extreme, like getting into the weeds and creating chaos for both sides. What about the other extreme?
Totally. Look, we are here as consultants. You and I, we're in the same business in this regard. I mean, I happen to be consulting on legal issues. You're consulting on business issues. But, we are only as good as the information we get, understanding our clients, what's important to them and why. And to the extent they're focused on the deal and they're able to communicate that to us, then we're able to serve them better. And what's good for Dr. Smith is not necessarily good for Dr. Jones. What, Dr. Johnson cares about, Dr. Lee may not give two hoots about. So it's important to communicate and for us to understand kind of where they're coming from. And, I'm going to take this a step further, not to sound like, an alarmist with this, but, I will tell you, we help people with transitions. We help buyers. We help sellers. We help people with startups. We help people with partnerships. We help people with employment agreements. We counsel people on HR things. We see kind of the whole dental legal business world. No good ever comes to the practice owner who is completely checked out from the affairs of their business. Okay. So the people who, end up being victims of fraud within their office, they have other problems that are business problems where they weren't focused on what was going on in their business. They have problems, it's no secret that, the office manager steals from the person who has given them the opportunity to steal from. So I just going to go out, sort of take a flyer here, Michael. If you're that kind of person, and you're that uninterested in this part of the process, you may want to take a big step back and see, are you really going to be interested in being a practice owner and doing all the things that you need to do to keep your eye on the ball to be successful?
I couldn't echo that more, Rob, because I'm not going to lie. I've had clients, absolutely, that I sat there and thought, they hired me to pretty much do this whole thing, and I want them to have more involvement. I'll do my job because they've hired me to do that. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, why are you going through this process? Is it because your buddy is the owner? Is because it's okay to be an associate. It's absolutely okay to be an associate. And if you have the aspiration, we are so pro ownership, everything that we do at Next Level, and this podcast is helping to promote the person that wants to get into ownership. But it's also okay not to get into ownership, and you really do have to grab the bull by the horns. And so there are those two extremes. I'm glad you brought up, yes, of course, there's that happy medium. And so I tend to be an extremist, Rob, just to prove a point. So I think everybody knows that about me. But yeah, I get very frustrated when people don't grab the bull by the horn. So thank you for that. I've got two more things I want to cover in this episode, and we've got good time here. One question that I have, kind of similar to where we just landed, is I find that, and I work with attorneys all over the country, and I find that, like, here in Seattle in the Pacific Northwest, we tend to be purist. Our contracts are very, very detailed, almost outlining every single thing. And then I'll go to like an Arizona state where it's very DSO friendly, and it's like the contracts are much shorter. And so I'll just kind of see this, and you've got to see it too, because you work all over the country. Mm-hmm. And so here's my question is, are you, philosophy wise, where do you sit at? Go in with a lot of detail up front to make the deal go faster and outline everything, or keep it open-ended so that there's a lot of interpretation? I get that a lot, and I'm curious from you, Rob, what's your approach, what's your philosophy at the firm?
Well, this is going to be the theme of the show, Michael. I like the happy medium, right? Yeah. I like the middle.
No, you're being such a politician. No, I'm joking. You're right. There is a happy medium, and I tend to go extreme, but let's talk about both. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the things, the contract itself should be detailed. There's no doubt about it. I mean, any agreement that two reasonable people could look at and come away with a different interpretation as to its meaning is a bad agreement. I mean, and that's a ticket to a lawsuit. Two people interpret a contract differently, that is also known as a dispute that may make it to court, a dispute that may not make it to court, but that's to be avoided. And frankly, in this dental world that we're in, there's no reason for it. There's nothing that should be left to chance. And we feel strongly about, having our processes and jumping on the important things early to avoid problems and surprises down the road. So whether you're talking about, lien searches, making sure that there's no idle loan that's a lien on the practice, PPP issues. What does a third party lease look like? Has the practice, if it's a PPO heavy practice, is your buyer client credentialed with those as an in-network provider at closing? Like, we'd like to get out in front of all those things. None of these things, Michael, are surprises. Like, we do enough of this. We know what needs to be done at the end.
It's pretty boilerplate, right? Yeah.
Well, it should be. It should be, right? And then, it's like, having that outline instead of like a boilerplate. I think almost a better way to put it is just an outline of what needs to be done. And then there's actually doing it, and if you do enough of these and you've been doing it, large enough volume for a long enough time, kind of what to look out for. And look, there's weird stuff that comes down the pipe all the time. We had it, and like, that's like, wow. Who would have ever thought that happened? That's 1 in 1,000. Literally, we've done 1,000 of these. That's never happened.
I've been in the industry for 15 years, and it blows my mind that I can run into a scenario that's never come up. How's that? That happens in your world all the time too, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, not all the time, but from time to time. And I think that's one of the things that people have to realize that they're buying when they hire a consultant is you are getting advice, and the advice is coming from somebody who's experienced. And through that experience, that person has experienced sort of the good and the bad of others. So, you have the ability to leverage, everybody else's good and bad decisions. And, and that's the advice you get. I would say just generally, though, with agreements, our philosophy is really to try to come up with a contract and a deal that is good for both parties. And I hate to say it's win-win because that's just so trite. So many people throw that out. But, we do talk about practice transitions. This is, you're selling a dental practice, you transition a dental practice, you buy a liquor store, right? You sell a furniture store, right? But you transition a dental practice. So whether you're talking about the sale or purchase of a practice or a buy-in or any kind of partnership, and frankly, Michael, any relationship for that matter, where there is a winner and a loser, that will generally be a bad relationship. Again, practice transition, partnership, attorney-client, a husband, a marriage, take your pick. A winner, any of those arrangements that has a winner and a loser is doomed, to fail. And because eventually the loser is going to wake up and say, why am I losing here? So when it comes to documents, we try to protect our client as much as possible, but we don't try to do it to quote unquote win the agreement, to put the other side in peril. And I will say that, that always used to be the case with these types of deals that we're talking about with dental practice transitions. And I've been representing dentists for 27 years. And however, in recent years, and especially in the last 2 years, the proliferation of DSOs and corporate buyers has really changed that mentality in a lot of settings. And in those groups, you really find that they are looking to quote unquote win the deal, win the contract. And as a result, there's a lot of really bad stuff in their agreements. And so, and that's not just in a transition agreement either, associate agreements too. Like the old days of the 5 or 6 page owner operator agreement that was reasonable and fair for the associate has turned into this like 20 page potential house of horrors for a young associate that has the ability to stymie their ability to transition into practice ownership, in terms of notice periods, required terms, unreasonable covenants not to compete. That has just really changed the point where it's like, congratulations, employer, you quote unquote won the deal, but at what cost? So that's our mindset. I mean, that is kind of the owner operator mindset. I mean, I think most of the people that are in the space that represent owner operators kind of play under, in that game, in that sandbox. But, I'd be lying if I said that the other crew isn't very involved in our industry too. And with that involvement, sometimes that stuff even trickles down to the owner operator deals as well.
Yeah, I like that you're delineating that. You're right. I mean, it's almost become predatory in a lot of ways. It's sad. My 100 deals in the last 2 years, all private practice, and I'm proud to say that. It doesn't mean that someone's terrible for working with the DSO, but just big picture, like I'm pro ownership, pro private practice. We're trying to help clients get into ownership the right way, be better business people, and agreements are such an important thing to that process, whether it's all the way from associate contract, which you outlined, all the way through purchase and sale and so on. Ironically, I did a deal. We bought a practice from a DSO 2 years ago, and we got to experience the seller being that way. And it was really interesting going through that legal process and how they looked at certain things. And folks, I will say, where there's smoke, there's fire, because once something looks different than the outline that Robert just said, so follow your attorney's advice in that, like when he outlines something and, hey, this is the standard, but they're asking for this and it's completely different. Where there's smoke, there's fire, because we found after the transition that, okay, we conceded a little bit on a particular point, and ironically post-sale, that was exactly what the problem was. So you can really smoke that out. And so I actually wanted to ask Rob this today, kind of finishing up this last topic, is like a lawsuit. Let's talk about like the worst case scenario, okay? I find myself in a situation where the agreement that you help people put together protects us from a buyer's perspective to the T. Like if you're working with a great attorney like Robert's firm and all of his wonderful attorneys, they're going to protect you from soup to nuts. But then the question is lawsuits afterwards. Like, let me give you an example. We found a lot of things going on with the ARs. ARs are a common lawsuit situation. We found that they did steal some of our team members, just deliberately solicited. We found they took a couple sensors after the fact. Just stuff where they blatantly broke the contract. Okay? It was in the contract. We have an argument. But the question for these private practices post-sale is, do you take someone to court over $10,000? That tends to be a very frustrating thing as a consultant post-close, as we help doctors all the way through. And it's like, well, crap, are we really going to take this person to small claims court? We're going to win, but we're going to win $20,000 or something, and it's almost not worth it. What are your thoughts about that, Rob? I'm sure you've been into some of these legal disputes, and is there really a winner going down that path?
I'm going to knock on wood. It's very rare that we have that in our deals. Very, very, very rare. I think most of it can be headed off. There are no winners in litigation ever. And so it should be avoided at all costs. It's really, I would say, just at the outset, it really depends, Michael. It's a case by case basis. But, some things to think about, if you're in a fee for service practice or you're buying a fee for service practice, litigating with the seller may not be the greatest business plan for your practice transition. If it's a PPO based practice, it doesn't matter as much. You want to make sure that the agreement itself has language in there that allows you to recover your attorney's fees if you prevail in that litigation. That should be, as a matter of course in all these documents. And if any seller wants to try to negotiate that out of the deal, that's a huge red flag. But you should be able to get your legal fees. But even if you get your legal fees, that means a court would award those legal fees, maybe, if you prevail. It doesn't mean that you would get all of them. And then on top of that, you still have to collect the money. So even if you, quote unquote, win the lawsuit, the next step is collecting the money. And, is there going to be anything there to get? Is the seller the practice entity and such that it no longer has any assets? Was the seller's principal a party to the agreement, or were they a party to the indemnification, or the rep and warranty that may have been breached? All these things matter and factor into what can you possibly expect to get? Usually, and I put that in quotes, the aggravation of collecting $10,000 doesn't justify collecting $10,000. There are, you may occasionally see holdbacks where the seller doesn't receive all of the purchase price. That some things are escrowed for these types of issues. That's become increasingly rare. It used to be you would see it sometime, but in most markets around the country, it's very much a seller's market. And so if a seller has 5 potential buyers, why would they ever agree to that on a particular deal? But it does matter. It depends, on a case by case basis. And if you get burned for $100,000, well, you know what? That might be time to think about some litigation. But if so much of it really can be headed off by not just the agreement, but it's the management of the deal leading up to the agreement, the administration of the agreement, and making sure that everything that's out there has been looked at, all the rocks have been overturned, and you've done what you need to do to try to avoid that situation. Because anytime you go into a contract, sort of the ability to litigate it or indemnification or those types of things, that's a last resort. And I like to tell people, if you don't trust the other person on the side of the deal, or there are red flags that are out there, there's nothing in that contract that I can write to make an untrustworthy person trustworthy.
Said. Yeah.
I don't have that power. I wish I did. And if I did, I would double my rates. But right. It's just, that is these documents are, the ticket to the lawsuit, so to speak. So it should be the fallback, not the, hey, don't worry about it. If it's wrong or bad, we'll just sue them. No, that's not the right mindset.
Yeah. In fact, like you said, you started off with worst case scenario, at all costs, avoid it. It's like war. I mean, you don't want to do that if you can work through it. We just came off of Shark Week with all of practice brokers being interviewed, and even before all of those interviews, we talked about how to find practices without brokers. And I would say that in the times that I've had issues where we were protected, but we just didn't want to go down the path of litigation, practice broker played a really cool role in helping a seller not make the wrong decisions post close, and that should be talked about. Like that practice brokers can actually be advocates for the buyers, because again, to reiterate and say it again, you've heard it throughout the entire process here, is that we are doing transitions. We are transitioning businesses. This is a business of passing goodwill, passing team, passing patients. And so it's still very much that, even though the DSOs are kind of messing it up, like you said, but it still is, the majority is still like that. And the practice brokers also want the buyer to be successful, because they want you to call them and sell their practice someday. And so just big picture, this is still very much a relationship business. I love that about us. And between all of the professionals, they can help mitigate these lawsuits. I will also say again that having all of these professionals, I've said it before, I'm picking a percentage out of the air, but your professionals, all the people that are going to help you, can mitigate risk, maybe 50%, 40% of the risk of the success post-close. Rob's going to do his job. I'm going to do my job. You're going to know the CPA is going to do their job. The bank's going to do their job. At the end of the day, you still have to pick up the hand pieces and deliver a great skill and a service, connect with the patients, do a great job with the team, make everybody feel great after transition. At the end of the day, we can only save the deal so much. And to Rob's point, the seller can be a jerk, and we can't change that, but there's only so much. So there's always going to be risk in the deal, bottom line. But the goal with all these professionals that you hire is to mitigate risk. There's always going to be risk, bottom line.
Yep.
So with that being said, Rob, final thoughts. I really enjoyed our conversation, and it's a good thing you did throw out that consent in the beginning, because I really asked you some tough questions. So you did a great job handling it. Any final thoughts? I mean, I've really appreciated you being on here. Any last minute things, golden nuggets you'd give my followers?
Yeah, I think, kind of tagging along on that, sort of the importance of being engaged and involved in your practice, not just being checked out and abdicating, responsibility. It's owning your own professional practice can be a very rewarding, cool thing. And I have had my practice now, it'll be 25 years in July. I can't say that every day is the most awesome day, but it's, I'm glad I did it and I enjoy doing it. But it's a tricky thing to run a professional business, a professional practice business. And, know that, every day you're going to be dealing with that, somewhat competing interests of running a business and rendering professional services. And it's a big challenge, and some days you're going to do better at it than others, but you can't just if you're a practice owner, you can't just be a dentist, or you can't just be a business person. And it's a challenge that, presents itself to me on a regular basis, and it's and some days, like I said, you're better at it than others, but realize that both of those components are important if you're going to be a practice owner. And it's something that you will practice and work on a regular basis. Don't be hard on yourself when, you make a business decision that's not maybe the best, or if something clinically isn't, the greatest thing that you've ever done. I think you have to be kind to yourself and know that challenge exists, and it's something that you will work on throughout your practice ownership journey. I think, but it's a great thing. And, despite all the chicken littles running around out there saying, the world of the owner or operator owned, dental practice is gone. DSOs and corporations are here forever. I'm like, I'm not buying it. I mean, I was representing dentists in the early and mid 90s when there were a lot of IPOs that were out there, and dentists and dental practices were being rolled up. And then, one day market conditions changed and they all went away. That's not going to happen now. I mean, DSOs have penetrated the space to a point where they're not leaving one day. But, by the same token, I don't see a world that no private ownership of dental practices exists in. So, encourage everybody to evaluate it. And if it's for you, great. And if it's not, as you said, Michael, it's fine to just be a dentist and be an associate. And there's plenty of opportunities for folks out there for that as well.
I couldn't have wrapped up an episode better. You just heard it from a legend in the industry, advocate of you all. Thanks, Rob, for being on the show and giving us the tips and tricks and giving back to the industry. I just want to remind everybody below in the show notes, we're going to have all of Rob's contact information. Again, reminder, yourdentallawyer.com. You can get a hold of Rob himself and work with his great team. The other plug there is the Dental Amigos, a great show. I've listened to it many times, and this makes us partners. Thanks again for giving us your time today. And no, folks, he's not going to send out bills to everybody. This was all for you guys. This was all for you. So thank you, sir. We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, Michael. And I will say one of the great things too about the podcasting world is I truly believe there's no such thing as competition in the podcasting space. It truly is,
It's not.
the brotherhood and the sisterhood of,
Yeah.
people sharing ideas and doing things. And hopefully that never changes in the podcasting world. So, it's been a blast being on here. I appreciate the opportunity and thanks so much for having me.
You're the man, buddy. All right, we'll talk soon. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Tune in next time for another truth-filled episode of Acquisition Unscripted. We want to hear from you. Interact with your host, Michael Dencio. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Comment and subscribe.